Now, as of last Tuesday, she was officially back for the Sparks game against the Aces. And look, she came back almost like she never left. Her very first point in the game being a three-pointer. So, if there was any debate as to who should be the QB2 underneath Justin Herbert, Trey Lance definitely made a great argument in this game. Now, I think with quarterback Arch Manning being able to finally play a full season of college football on top of receiving a top defensive player and a top 10 recruit in the country, I think Texas is going to yet again be another top team for this upcoming season. Now, this was, of course, going back and forth, went into extra time, and eventually this match had to go into the penalties. And that is when England won in the penalties 3-1, and they were the Women's Euros champion. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to a brand new episode of Ball Talk with Chanel. As always, this episode will cover some of the biggest news that's happened in the last week. We had the return of a certain WNBA player, we had the Women's Euros final, we had the first NFL preseason game, and so much more. So, this episode will be split into 4 sections. In the first section, I will be covering the WNBA. I will be talking about the return of a WNBA player who hasn't played in over a year. I will be talking about a certain move in a WNBA game that I feel does not get talked about enough. I'll be talking about the chaotic journey of a certain WNBA player. And then at the end, I will be talking about some predictions for the individual WNBA awards. In the next section, that will be focused all about the NFL. So, first, I will be going over the NFL preseason game that just happened last week, as well as talk about 2 of the biggest contract disputes that has been in the news for the past few weeks. And then afterwards, I will be talking about college football. We are about a month away from the start of the season, so I will be recapping some of the biggest transfers from the offseason. I will be talking about some of the biggest recruits that has happened for this season, as well as provide some early predictions about how I think the college football season will go. And then in the last section, I will be talking about soccer. So first, I will be covering the Women's Euros final that happened last week, and then I will be covering all the matches that happened last week for the Women's Copa America, and then I will talk about the transfer of a Golden Boy recipient that just happened in the last week. So, with all that being said, let's get on with the episode. So, starting with the first section, the WNBA. So, in last week's episode, I talked about how we are close to seeing the return of LA Sparks player Cameron Brink, who got hurt last June during their game against the Connecticut Sun, and she ended up tearing her ACL. Now, as of last Tuesday, she was officially back for the Sparks game against the Aces. And look, she came back almost like she never left. Her very first point in the game being a three-pointer. Her very first point in over a year, and she hits a 3. Now, even though Cameron did play for less than 20 minutes, it was still great to see her back onto the court, doing what she does best, hitting the 3, setting the screens, setting a pick, going down low, getting the blocks. It was still great to see her do all of that. And keeping on this conversation, it is good to see LA Sparks coach Lynn Roberts taking it easy with Cameron and easing her back into the game, because it allows Cameron to not only feel comfortable going back in, but then it also minimizes her re-injuring her leg and just her knee specifically. And I do wish that Fever coach Stephanie White will take some notes, because like I've mentioned in previous episodes, we have seen Caitlin go out and out again and again this season with some sort of injury, whether it is a leg injury, whether it is a groin injury, which is what she's out with right now. And each time Caitlin comes back, it seems like Stephanie White just throws her in and lets her play for 40 minutes. And I really do hope that she would take notes from Lynn and just allow Caitlin to ease back into the game. Don't just throw her in for 40 minutes, because that's why she keeps re-injuring herself. So I'm really glad that Lynn is taking it easy with Cameron. I'm glad that she's allowing Cameron to ease back into the game and work her way into playing a full 30, 40-minute game. And I hope that Stephanie please take some notes about this so Caitlin is not an injury prone player. Now, keeping on with this conversation about the Sparks playing the Aces, which is who they ultimately lost to, I want to give a shout out to a couple of the Aces players. So, the first player I want to talk about is Asia Wilson because in that game against the Sparks, she had a phenomenal performance. She put up 34 points, 10 rebounds, 4 assists, 3 steals, and 3 blocks. She had such a phenomenal, complete game. This is the player that everyone knows. This is the player that everyone loves. This is the reason why she is one of the best players in the league. It's because of performances like this. But the other player I want to give a shout out to is Jackie Young because she also had a great game, ending the game with 18 points, 11 rebounds, and 11 assists. She recorded a triple-double going alongside Asia Wilson's double-double. I mean, it was just a great performance overall from the Aces. It was a great performance from them too, and I really do hope that we continue to see these two players ball out the way that they did for the rest of the season. Now, moving away from that Sparks and Aces game, I want to talk about another game that happened last week, Wednesday. And that was between Paige Bueckers and the Dallas Wings versus Alicia Gray and the Atlanta Dream. Because what a great game. We saw a 15.6 rebound, 7 assist game from Alicia Gray. We saw a 21-point game from Nas Hillman. We saw a 21-point and 7 assist game from Paige Bueckers. It was just a great overall game from both teams. Ultimately, the Wings could not convert at the end, and that allowed the Dream to have a 3-point win over the Wings. But there was one specific moment in this game that I want to point out. And that was in the third quarter when Paige Bueckers, having the ball in her hand, getting the switch that she wanted after her teammate set a screen for her, when she dribbled behind the back and shot a 3 and it switched in. Now, a lot of people are not talking about this. And the reason why I want to bring this up is because this was a great play from her. This really shows you how talented of a player she is. Think about it. How often do you see a play like that in the WNBA? Someone dribble behind the back and shoot a 3 like that? It really does reminisce Kyrie Irving. And I know a lot of people got triggered on social media when someone made the comparison of Paige Bueckers to Kyrie Irving. But ultimately, Paige's game overall is truly like Kyrie's. She has the handles, she has the shot creation, she has the spacing. Like, she has everything that Kyrie can do. Now, obviously, Kyrie Irving is a better player than Paige. No one is saying that Paige Bueckers is an equally good or better player than Kyrie. All it is just a comparison, just like how people compare players in the NBA or how they compare in the NFL. So, just because they're not exactly alike doesn't mean that you can't see the reminiscence between the two players. I don't know why people were triggered about that, and I will forever not know. But what I do want to say about that play is it was such a great play. It shows you how complete of a game that Paige Bueckers has, whether it is the shot creation to the ball handling skills to the three-pointer. I mean, you really see that Paige Bueckers really does have the potential of being the best player in the WNBA. Not the best rookie. Well, she is the best rookie right now. Not the best guard. The best player. I think she has probably the most complete game in the WNBA. And that was definitely shown in that play. I wish more people would talk about it because, like I keep emphasizing, it was a phenomenal play. Now, keeping on with this conversation, I do want to talk about Haley Jones. Now, she did end the game with 12 points, 3 rebounds, and 3 assists. But listen, Haley Jones's career in the WNBA, especially for this season, has been nothing that is easy, okay? She was, of course, drafted by the Atlanta Dream, and earlier this season, they waived her. She was picked up by the Aces, who then dropped her within a week. She was picked up by the Wings, who then dropped her. And then she was picked up by the Wings again, and that is the team she is currently on. Now, I love the fact with Haley that no matter what life has thrown at her, she has continued to keep her head up. She has continued to work on her game. And listen, she had such a good game in this game against the Dream. I know the stats doesn't really look like it, but you can really see a lot more confidence. You see a lot more aggression. You see the Haley Jones that we saw in her when she was playing at Stanford. How aggressive of a player she is, how she wants to create the shots for herself. We see a lot more of that from this game. And it is great to see Haley try to find her home, and it seems like she finally found it in Dallas. Hopefully, Dallas gives her a chance because I think she is a great player. She will be a great compliment, especially to Enrique and Paige. And I think she is just a great asset to this team overall. And so I really do hope that the Dallas Wings do not drop her. And I do hope that Haley can find her confidence, find her rhythm, find that inner aggression and aggressive playing that would allow her to stay on this team. Now, before we move on to the next section, I want to talk about some early predictions for the individual WNBA awards. Now, in last week's episode, I already talked about who I think should get the WNBA MVP award. So if you want to see who I think is going to get that, then you can go check out that episode. But now let's look at the rest of the awards and who I think should be winning them. So first off, looking at Rookie of the Year, I think without a doubt, without any question, that should go to Paige Bueckers. Like I've mentioned beforehand, especially in her game against the Dream, she has been putting on a performance. She is, for the season, averaging 18 points, 4 rebounds, 6 assists, and 2 steals. She is third in the league right now in steals as a rookie. She is having such a great season despite the Wings struggling. She is having such a great season. She's already breaking records. So this award, in no doubt whatsoever, should go to Paige. Now, moving on to Defensive Player of the Year, I think this award should go to A'ja Wilson. She is second in the league in rebounds per game. She is sixth in the league in steals per game. She leads the league in blocks per game. I mean, there is no doubt in my mind that A'ja Wilson is the best defensive player in the league. No doubt whatsoever. I think that the stats should also speak for itself. And I think ultimately that it should go to A'ja. Now, looking at Sixth Player of the Year, I think this award should go to Tiffany Hayes of the Golden State Valkyries. Off the bench, she is averaging 12 points, 4 rebounds, and 3 assists. She is having such a good season coming off the bench, and especially for the team. She is such a huge asset, and I don't think there's really any competition. I think that this award should really go to her. And now for the last individual award, which is the Most Improved Player award, I think that end of discussion should go to Angel Reese. Angel has been having such a great second half of the season. If you see her growth from even her rookie season and even the beginning of this season to now, you can see how much better she is getting. Her efficiency has increased, her scoring has increased, like everything about her game overall has truly gotten better. So no doubt in my mind, no discussion, no argument. I think that award should go to Angel herself. So now let's move on to the next section, which is all about the NFL. Now, last week we did have the very first preseason game between the Detroit Lions and the LA Chargers for the Hall of Fame game. And a lot of people were talking about how this game is not serious, it's just a preseason game, and it's just a bunch of second and third stringers. But I don't think people understand that even though the starters are not playing, does not mean that this game is not important. Because what happens if one of the starters get hurt? Who are you going to put in to replace them? That's why these preseason games are important. Because let's say, for example, someone like Jared Goff or Justin Herbert, knock on wood, let's say they have a season-ending injury. You don't know who can come in as a QB2 for one of those players unless you see these players not only in practices, but you see how they can perform in the games during game time situations. So, even though people want to talk about, okay, you know, the preseason game is not important and it's not that serious and it's just something that we should not be talking about, it is something we should be talking about because at the end of the day, this is still sports. Something like a season-ending injury could happen, and these coaches need to know who it is that they want to bring in, and that ultimately affects the team overall. So, that was a little bit of a tangent, but now let's get on to the game in and of itself. Now, the Chargers completely dominated against the Lions. They won 34-7. So let's look first at the Chargers. Trey Lance looked really good in that game. He had 13 of 20 completed passes. He threw for 120 yards. He threw 2 touchdown passes. Like, he had such a great game. So, if there was any debate as to who should be the QB2 underneath Justin Herbert, Trey Lance definitely made a great argument in this game. He looked really, really good. He was moving around outside of the pocket. He was not holding the ball for too long. He had good looks down the field. Like, he just really looked good. He looked more confident. And that was such a great performance, I think, that I have seen in a long time from Trey Lance. Now, looking at the Lions looked completely sloppy. Okay. The opening kickoff return being a fumble and then converted to a touchdown is just unacceptable. I don't care if you're the second stringer or you're the third stringer. Like, that is just unacceptable. And you saw in Dan Campbell's face how much he was not happy about that. And Kyle Allen did not look good. Of the 5 turnovers that the Lions had in that game, 2 of them were picks that were thrown by Kyle Allen. And if he wanted to make an argument as to why he should be the QB2 underneath Jared Goff, that game did not tell it whatsoever. That actually showed that he should be the QB3 or maybe should not even be considered. It sounds a little harsh, but it was truly a sloppy game from him. So hopefully that he can show a better performance in the Lions' next preseason game. But that game ultimately did not look good from him. So let's move away now from the talks of the preseason game and let's talk about 2 of the biggest contract disputes that is happening in the league right now. First one I want to talk about is Terry McLaurin and the Washington Commanders. Now, like I've mentioned beforehand, Terry and the Commanders are just not in agreement right now. And as of a few days ago, it was reported that Terry has requested a trade from the Commanders. Now, I don't know if the Commanders were trying to lowball him or if McLaurin was trying to ask for a Jamar Chase type of contract, but ultimately the 2 parties just could not agree. But it will be interesting, though, to see which teams will trade to get McLaurin. And I think that McLaurin is such a great receiver. So I think any team that is missing that receiver, that wide receiver 1, could use someone like McLaurin. I think the bigger question, though, is what is it that he is going to sign for, just as far as money-wise? Are they going to sign him and give him a Jamar Chase type of contract, or even someone like Garrett Wilson who just signed where his AAV is $32.5 million per year? Are they going to give him that type of contract? Or is it going to be where McLaurin's just not going to have a choice and he's going to have to take a contract that is similar to what he has right now or maybe even lower? I think that is the biggest gamble right now. And I think if I were the Commanders, I would try to offer a contract that is either within the $25 to $30 million a year, or even try to get him like a Garrett Wilson type of contract. If I were the Commanders, I would try my absolute hardest to not have Terry McLaurin get traded, because if he is traded, who else do they have as their wide receiver 1? Debo? I don't think Debo is going to be a good wide receiver 1. He's not going to be able to do what Terry McLaurin just did last season. And I think the Commanders losing McLaurin is going to really, really hurt them. And it's going to hurt their chances of making the same run that they just did this past season. Hopefully, they will be able to come to some sort of agreement. Hopefully, we'll see McLaurin still stay with the Commanders. But we will just have to wait and see for the updates and see what they decide to do with McLaurin. Now, the second contract dispute that I want to talk about is the one with Micah Parsons and the Dallas Cowboys. Now, again, just like with McLaurin and the Commanders, Parsons and the Cowboys are just not agreeing to the money. And now it is to the point that Parsons has officially requested a trade from the Cowboys. He first went on to X to voice his frustrations, saying things such as, "I don't want to be here, and I'm not going to be in any closed-door negotiations without my agent," and the fact that the Cowboys keep bringing up his injuries when he's done nothing but try to give to the team and to the fan base, and ultimately just ended by saying that he officially told Stephen Jones, who happens to be Jerry Jones' son, that he wants a trade just from the team. He no longer wants to be a Dallas Cowboy. Now, it is sad to see that contract negotiations are just not going good between the two. But what's really interesting is Jerry Jones made a comment about the Micah Parsons trade, basically told fans not to worry and don't lose any hope. So I don't know if he's trying to say that they're going to try to keep Micah and they're in negotiations of that, or if they're going to try to sign another left edge that is going to do exactly what Micah has done, or maybe perform even better than Micah has. I don't know exactly what that comment means, but it was a very interesting comment to see. Now, if Micah is traded, it would be interesting to see exactly who he decides to go and play for. Now, just like with McLaurin, it's not going to be the issue of talent or how much they're going to give up. It's going to be the matter of contract. Is Parsons going to receive the same contract as someone such as TJ Watt or Max Crosby? Or is he actually going to receive a contract because he has no choice and the value is going to be lower than what he wanted? It is just another really messy situation, just something that we're going to have to look out and see and just wait for any updates that are reported. Right now, we're going to take a quick break, and before we move on, please be sure to check out my description box down below that gives you all of my social media accounts. If you want daily news and reactions, then you can go check out my TikTok, my Instagram, my Facebook. If you want to see what a day in the life looks like for me, you can go check out my Snapchat. If you want to see some daily hot takes about the latest news, then you can follow my Threads and my X accounts. If you're listening to this on Spotify, please be sure to give this a 5-star rating. Please be sure to follow this page so you do not miss a single episode. And if you are watching this on YouTube, please be sure to hit the thumbs up button down below. Please be sure to subscribe to this page and turn on notifications so you do not miss a single episode. So now let's move on to the next section, which is all about college football. Now, like I mentioned in the beginning of this episode, we are about a month away from the start of the regular season. So, let's start first with some of the biggest transfers that has happened in the offseason. We had quarterback Nico Yamaleva, who made controversy after requesting a transfer from Tennessee, and it seemed to be all about the money, and he ended up eventually transferring to UCLA. Then we had quarterback Carson Beck, who transferred from Georgia to Miami after it was reported that Miami was giving him a deal that was worth up to $10 million in NIL. And then we had wide receiver Eric Singleton Jr. from Georgia Tech, who transferred to Auburn. And then we had Deuce Robinson, the wide receiver from Southern California, who transferred to Florida State. So those are a few of the offensive players. Now let's look at some of the defensive players. We had offensive tackle Isaiah World from the University of Nevada, who transferred to Oregon for this season. We had edge Damon Wilson II, who transferred from Georgia to Missouri. And we had edge Patrick Payton, who transferred from Florida State to LSU, and we had so much more. So, those are some of the biggest transfers that has happened for this season. Now, let's look at some of the big recruits. So, starting, of course, with the offensive players, we had quarterback Bryce Underwood, who was the top recruit in the country, who committed to Michigan. We had quarterback Keelan Russell, who was number 2 in the country, who committed to Alabama. We had quarterback Tavian St. Clair, who was ranked number 4 in the country, who committed to Ohio State. And then we had wide receiver DeCorian Moore, who was the number 1 wide receiver in the country and number 9 recruit overall, who committed to Oregon. And then for the defensive players, we had defensive lineman Elijah Griffin, who was number 3 in the country, who committed to Georgia. We had cornerback Devin Sanchez, who was number 5 in the country, who committed to Ohio State. We had safety Jonah Williams, who was number 6 in the country, who committed to Texas. And then we had defensive lineman Amari Adams, who was number 7 as a recruit in the country, who committed to Clemson. Now, as you can see, you have the big schools, of course, like your Michigans, your Alabamas, your Georgias, who was also getting the big recruits as well as the big transfers. So before we move on to the last section, let's talk about who I think are going to be the big top teams for this upcoming season. So first team I want to talk about is Ohio State, the reigning champs themselves. Now, of course, they have been a powerhouse for the past decade, so it's really not shocking. But listen, in the past few years, they really have been making that comeback of being the top 5 teams in the country, and I would not be shocked if they were also a top 5 team for this upcoming season. They have had some big recruits, they have had some big transfers like I've mentioned before, and I think for Ryan Day. He is going to try to make that statement and be back-to-back champs, especially with having star players such as Jeremiah Smith. Now, the next school I want to talk about is Oregon, another school that really has been making a statement of being a powerhouse team in the past couple of years. Now, they did make it to the college football playoffs, and they were unfortunately blown out by Ohio State. But I think they are going to come back and still be a top 5 team in the country. I think Dan Lanning is really going to make a statement, especially picking up receivers such as DeCorian Moore. And I think that they are really going to give teams such as Ohio State a hard time for this season. So I would not be shocked if Oregon was, yet again, one of the top teams in the country for this upcoming season. Now, the next team I do want to talk about is Texas. Now, they did make it to the semifinals where they ended up losing to Ohio State. Now, I think with quarterback Arch Manning being able to finally play a full season of college football, on top of receiving a top defensive player and a top 10 recruit in the country, I think Texas is going to yet again be another top team for this upcoming season. Now, the last team I do want to talk about is Alabama. Now, Alabama did not have a great season last season. In fact, they were the first team out of making the college football playoffs last season. But I think between picking up Keelan Russell, who was the number 2 quarterback in the country, he is a really good player and he is very promising, alongside having players such as Ryan Williams, I think Alabama is really going to have that come up. I think they are going to make a statement and have that bounce back, and I think they are going to be a top team in this next season. So I would not be shocked if Alabama was yet again one of the top teams in the country. So now let's move on to the last section, which is all about soccer. So let's start first with recapping what happened during the Women's Euros final, which was between England and Spain. Now, this match was a very back and forth match, and we saw the first goal of the match in the first goal from Spain from forward Mariona Caldente in the 25th minute. And then in the second half of the match, in the 57th minute, we saw a match-tying goal from England forward Alicia Russo. Now, this was, of course, going back and forth, went into extra time, and eventually this match had to go into the penalties. And that is when England won in the penalties 3-1, and they were the Women's Euros champion. Now, one thing I want to talk about with the penalties is that the match-winning penalty kick that was scored from Chloe Kelly was more powerful than the most powerful shot in the Men's Premier League. Let me break it down. So, in the Men's Premier League last season, Alexander Isak kicked the most powerful shot in the entire league for the entire season, and that kick was at 109 kilometers per hour. Chloe Kelly's kick in the Women's Euros final was at 110 kilometers per hour, which means that her kick was more powerful than Isak's kick in the Premier League, which was the most powerful kick in the Men's Premier League. That's how insane it was. It was a very great match from England and Spain. Of course, you saw the disappointment from Alexia Putellas, from Aitana Bonmati, and from the other star players. And you can just see how great of a match it was for England. This is their second straight Euros that they have won. And let's see if Spain would be able to make the comeback for the next Euros. So now moving away from the Women's Euros, let's talk about the Women's Copa America. Let's start first with the match for 5th place, which was between Chile and Paraguay. Now, it was a scoreless match the entire time, both teams going back and forth with shots being missed and shots being blocked. But then we saw a last-minute goal from Camila Gomez for Paraguay to secure the win against Chile. And then we go on to the semifinals, where we saw first the match between Argentina and Colombia. Now, they went scoreless the entire time. They had to go into the penalties, and Colombia ended up securing the win 5-4 to end up going to the finals. And then we get the second semifinals match, which was between Brazil and Uruguay. And Brazil put on a dominant performance, winning 5-1. We saw a goal from Amanda Gutierrez in the 11th minute. We saw a goal from Gio Garbellini in the 13th minute. We saw a penalty goal from Marta in the 27th minute. We saw a second goal from Amanda Gutierrez in the 65th minute. And we saw the last goal from Dudina in the 86th minute. And then we saw a goal from Isa Haas, who accidentally kicked the ball into their own goal. But either way, Brazil put on a dominant performance, and they would be facing Colombia in the final, a rematch from the very first round where the match went scoreless. So before we move on to the final, we have to talk about the match for third place, which was between Uruguay and Argentina. Now for Argentina, we did see a goal from Aldana Cometi in the 24th minute, and we saw a penalty kick from Florencia Bonsegundo in the 83rd minute. And then for Uruguay, we saw a goal from Esperanza Pizarro in the 35th minute, and we saw a goal from Juliana Vieira Alzueta in the 45th minute. So the match was tied at 2 apiece and eventually went into the penalties. And then in the penalties, Argentina won 5-4 and ended up winning the match for third place. So then we had the final between Brazil and Colombia, a rematch from their first meetup in the first round where the match went scoreless. So, for Brazil, we saw a goal scored from Angelina in the 45th minute. We saw a goal from Amanda Gutierrez in the 80th minute. And then we saw what would be the match-tying goal in the 90th minute from Marta. And for Colombia, we saw a goal from Linda Caicedo in the 25th minute. We saw a goal from Tassiani in the 69th minute after she accidentally kicked the ball in their own goal. And we saw a goal from Myra Ramirez in the 88th minute. So, with the match tied at 3 apiece, the match went into extra time. We saw another goal from Marta in the 105th minute where it allowed Brazil to take the lead. And then we saw a goal scored from Colombia player Lacey Santos in the 115th minute. That was the match tying goal. And then eventually the match went into the penalties in which Brazil ended up winning 5-4. It was such a great, exciting match. It was a very back and forth match, and it was just great to see Brazil come up with the win. Of course, it is also disappointing to see Colombia walk off very disappointed. And look, this was a very hard-earned and well-deserved win from Brazil. They put on a great performance, so did Colombia, and I just cannot wait for the next Women's Copa America. So now to finish up, I want to talk about the transfer of a Golden Boy recipient in the last week, and that is player Joao Felix, who was playing for AC Milan on loan. It is confirmed that he will be transferring to the Saudi League team Al Nassr for 2 years, and that is actually the same exact team that Ronaldo plays for currently. Now, as I saw this transfer news, all I kept thinking about was what happened, because he won the Golden Boy Award back in 2019, and it seemed like from there he was supposed to be the face of Europe. Now, this is not me saying that the Saudi League is bad and that it's not competitive. What I am saying, though, was that you have someone who was supposed to be the face of Europe that is not even playing in Europe anymore. I'm trying to figure out what happened. He kept bouncing around from team to team, from Chelsea to Atletico to Barcelona to AC Milan, and then now Al Nassr. He just seemed to just never find a home. He never found his footing in a certain team. Now, what I have noticed about Joao Felix is that each time he does join a team, he does very good. He looks very promising in the first few weeks. And then afterwards, he kind of slips and he declines, and then he just doesn't play that good for the rest of the season. I don't know if that is because it is a mental block or because there is just a certain weakness in his game that's getting exposed that he doesn't want to work on. Whatever the case may be, there seems to be this recurring pattern for Joao for each season, especially when he joins a new team. So maybe the Saudi League will just give him a fresh start. Maybe him learning under Ronaldo would allow him to advance his game. Maybe it's just something that he needs. Maybe this is the transfer that he needs to just advance his game. Now, it is great to see Ronaldo and Joao join up together. It's great to see the two Portuguese players play together in the Saudi League, and ultimately, I cannot wait to see how Joao plays in the Saudi League. I really do hope he plays very well, and I hope that his game just advances, because I think he is just too talented to be bouncing around from team to team the way he currently is. So, we would just have to wait until the upcoming season to see how everything plays out for Joao. But that is all for this episode. Thank you so much for tuning in. Be sure to tune in next Monday at 6 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. We will be talking more about the NFL, the WNBA, more college football, and other news like that. See you next week. Bye.